all the material from one hazel tree. Welcome back to Ended Farm. This week we're going to be looking at using hazel and coppicing hazel and why we might use hazel and willow together in the garden. One of the little jobs we're going to carry out today is coppicing hazel. We do have quite a long line of hazel that we planted about 3 or 4 years ago. This particular one's been in now for about 8 years and it's just starting to outgrow the space. You can see that the other trees around it are starting to grow up now. So we want to coppice this year, which is then going to give us lots of planting material that we can then use for strengthening up our animal shelters that we create in the fields. Basically, all I'm doing now is pulling some of the smaller, or cutting back some of the smaller stems so I can get into the base of the tree to do the main cuts. So all I'm doing is taking off some of the lower, whippier growth, and I'm going to stack these into different sizes as we go, because the different size branches all get used for different uses. This one we've let get a bit wild. The regrowth on this, once it's been coppiced, should produce these lovely straight rods, which will come straight up from the stool or the base of the plant once we've finished. But this one, as I say, it's about 8 years now and we haven't coppiced this yet. But this is its first coppice from a young plant. It's very flexible and forgiving as a plant, because all these rods are going to then be shaped up further before we actually use them. The key at the moment is just to try and keep different sizes as I'm going. Not too worried if I get a scruffy cut as I'm going down until I get closer to the ground, because when we start to get closer to the ground, we want to be leaving about 2 inches or 50 mil from the base, and that'll get cut down and that'll be a nice clean cut when we get there. But initially, I'm just harvesting similar sized rods and stacking them ready for reuse. So with that one in at the base, that's ideally what we're going to have. We want about 2 inches from the ground. And that is what we're after with the regrowth, which is a lovely straight rod. So that's great. That's really what we're going for. And by coppicing, we're looking to try and encourage nice straight growth that can be reused like that. With any job like this, the actual doing of the job, the cutting of the job, is the quick bit. The clearing up and focusing on working on what the material you've just generated is the bit that takes the time. And the final cut. And just to show you the fresh coppice, approximately 2, maybe 3 inches in places, but down to a nice stool In approximately 5 or 6 years' time, this will then be ready for coppicing again, and it's now going to send out some lovely straight, upright rods that are then going to grow away for this year. Both hazel and willow can be used to create plant supports, hurdles, border edgings. These are younger trees that we're looking at now. These will be coppiced next year or the year after, and you can see with this stand of hazel that we've got here amongst the birch, we were encouraging these lovely new growth and lovely straight long rods that are going to be fantastic when they're coppiced. Hazel you coppice every 5 to 6 years approximately, and then it will take another 5 years and you'll be back to the same stage and be able to coppice again. So once you cut it back and coppice it, you'll have a whole scattering of new shoots that will come from the stall at the base of the plant, and once you've opened up that space, they tend to grow up straighter, which makes it a lot easier for the next time you're coppicing. Always recognise hazel tree early in the year because of the catkins that are actually, normally, traditionally, this would be March. Now we're late January, early Feb, and about a month or so ahead of where they'd normally be. We use hazel predominantly for screening, for windbreaks, by making it into living and dead hedges, and we also use them to strengthen up some of the willow hurdles and some of the enclosures that we do to give the animals a bit of protection in the fields. We use willow because it would be a living screen, so we thicken up a lot of our hedges that we use around the boundary of the site with willow, because it's fast growing and also it's beneficial to the animals to be able to graze it during the summer. Hazel, we tend to use the rods that are slightly stronger and it lasts for longer. So where we're, for example, using it we use a lot of willow in our animal shelters and low hurdles that we make for the animals to protect them from the wind and the elements. When we're doing that, willow will only last for 1 to 2 years once it's cut. If it's living, it will last for a lot longer, but you need to be then cutting it and maintaining it every year to keep it to size and shape, but it will provide plentiful rods. Hazel can last from 3 to 5 years, so we tend to use a lot of the stronger hazel rods as the main supports to weave the willow through, and then we'll go through and we'll top up with willow every year. But you can actually create and use the hazel rods in exactly the same way to form a stronger boundary. Living willow would be cutting a green rod and inserting it about 1 foot into the ground to get it to grow. So then you've basically, in essence, you've got a new tree that's growing. So a living willow fence would basically be rods planted approximately 10 to 12 inches apart. And as that then grows, you weave that in together to form its own living hurdle. So every winter, you would then be reweaving in that year's growth to strengthen up the hurdle and the fence. This is our young hazel stand that we're now looking at here. So in either next year or the year after, some of these might then be big enough for coppicing. These trees are approximately 4 years old now on the ground. They've grown very well, but they're just not quite big enough for coppicing yet. So either next winter or the year after, we'll then selectively be able to come in and coppice some of these for use around the farm. Over on the left-hand side there, you can see one of the sheep enclosures that we've done for protection in the past, which was framed from willow. That's about 3 years old now. That one's going to need some patching up this year because it's had a lot of weathering over the last couple of years with storms and the weather. So we'll be knocking some more poles in over there, and again getting some fresh willow in there to give the sheep a bit of protection for the new season. So one of the things, as I say, that we use our willow and hazel for a lot is protection, be that protection for plants to keep the sheep and the animals off it, or conversely, it also then provides protection for the sheep and the animals over the winter. So as you can see, This was a hedge we put in 2 years ago. Behind it has created a nice sheltered area for the animals when the animals are in this section of the field, particularly up here where it blows a gale quite often. So you can see there's a mixture of hazel and willow uprights knocked in the ground there. Some of the willow is actually shot, which is one of the things that I was talking about. So when you're using willow, just be aware that quite often it will regrow. So if you don't want it to grow, you're always better to use hazel as your upright poles, and then you're weaving with the willow as a dead for structure. Through my gate. Basically this that's been in for a year or so now is starting to condense. So all I'm doing is pushing it down on top of itself, and I'm going to fold over some of those shoots and tuck them in, the living shoots, and tuck them through some of that dead material. Again, we hadn't intentionally planned on this being a green screen, but it's quite nice because the animals will actually chew on it at the side, and I'm quite happy with that because it gives them an extra bit of forage for over the summer when it's in growth. The other really nice thing with these sorts of hedges that we use, or screens and barriers that we use around the farm, is that a lot of the small birds, it's providing them with shelter, and that also this last year we had a lot of wrens that were also then nesting in some of these hurdle fences that we've got around the farm as well. So if we were doing this in the garden, it would be a lot prettier, but as this is purely for the sheep, I am more concerned about having a nice strong screen. It's going to offer them a bit of shelter than I am to how pretty it looks. Always simplest, but if you're doing anything like this, is tap the rods in together, tuck them in as a starting point, and then weave. And again, all I'm doing is reversing underneath for the length of the rod. If it was a much longer rod, you'd be able to go a bit further with it. But this is going to take quite a bit of material to get this up to where I want it. I'm going to leave it here because I've got quite a lot of work to be doing now to tidy up the hazel we've just cut at the bottom and get that up and used into one of these hurdles. If you've used hazel or willow in your garden on different projects, then please put them in the comments. We'd love to hear what you've been doing with your hazel and willow in your garden. So both willow and hazel are very forgiving plants, can be used year on year on year, and the key thing is really just, if you've got some plants, cut some rods, have a go.